So unfortunately, my customer backed into this with his trailer, kind of jackknifed it, and you can see the cracked paint there. But luckily, there's a flare that goes over that area. So our main purpose of this repair was to make it so the flare would fit properly and to make it so the dent would be as repaired as possible without putting a new bedside on and having to repaint the vehicle. Now, this vehicle is a 1980s Jeep Comanche, which is pretty rare around this part of the state. I live in Connecticut, and we get the salt, so most of these are just completely rotted out. I start by putting my suction cup heat gun on here. Anytime I work on a vehicle with damage like this, I want to heat up the panel so that it's nice and warm. This paint was actually repainted in I believe he said it was the early 2000s, and so we wanted to make sure that the paint was still flexible. The paint job was pretty decent, but it wasn't the greatest, and you could see that where the flare is, they just taped it off. They didn't take everything apart and do it, so it wasn't the greatest paint job quality. Now, on this particular job, I wanted to reshape the metal, and the best way of doing it with that lip is with the porta-power. So you're going to see me taking out the porta-power, which is basically just a hydraulic press. I'm going to press off of the frame rail on this vehicle and try to get some semblance of what the contour should be on the edge of the panel. Most of this panel is kicked in because of that edge of the panel holding it in. Once that's released, a lot of the other metal can be removed and put back to where it belongs. Now, unfortunately, there wasn't enough room to get the full porta-power in there. I had to use a piece of the porta-power, an extension piece with a foot, and then I had to use the jaw type press here. So it wasn't ideal, but it did end up working. And as you can see here, the metal is starting to push out. It was actually a lot more difficult to repair this vehicle than I had expected. I really had hoped that this would move a little bit easier here, but it was very strong, and that kink was pretty severe there. Now, the hydraulic ram, this is a snap-on model one. I want to say it was somewhere in the $300 to $400 price range, but I bought it a while ago, and it's paid for itself on the first time I ever used it. So if you don't have one, you can use them for so many different things. You can use them, you can put them against a seat, and then you can use the bar to reach all the way across the vehicle. You can use wooden blocks as spacers as well. So if you don't have enough reach, you can use wooden block, or there's a whole bunch of other things that you can use as well. This jaw type one here, it gets pretty thin, and you can actually fit it down in door panels in between braces sometimes. And they also sell other kits that you can put together on here. So they have it's like a mini puck style one that you can actually put and fit in lower areas of quarter panels where the jaw won't fit. And there's other areas, if you have a stretched hood, you can even use it to potentially shrink the metal. I've done that in the past. Now here I am thinking, what the hell did I get involved with this for? But I have a soft spot for people that have vehicles that they like to collect. This owner here actually had several vehicles. I worked on 2 of them, and I can really appreciate someone having a vehicle that's older that means something to them and is not necessarily super valuable, but there's no value you can put on it in their mind. So now that I have that metal somewhat back to where it belongs, I'm using just this cheap Harbor Freight dead blow hammer to basically put a little shape in the edge of the panel back to normal. Some of the pushing that I did actually kind of sent that out a little bit farther than it belonged, and so this way I can push and then hammer and then push and then hammer, and it's not perfect where it is right now, but it's pretty close to being flush. And the trim piece, I don't have it on the camera, I don't believe, but the trim piece fits snugly up against this edge. Now, I wish that this was open behind it, but on most pickup trucks, it's not open. There's usually another inner wall, so you can't actually hammer the rest of this dent out. Here's another angle showing the tail light out. Unfortunately, the access was awful here. Typically, there'll be a big spot you can put a rod right at the top and bottom or even the center of the taillight area. This one was like completely blocked off. Total nightmare. Here's the James Lee Illuminadent light, giving me a hard time. The spinal cord on it, you have to tighten it up quite a bit, and over time it breaks down, and this one's starting to get kind of loose. Now here you can see I'm pushing from the back, and you can see how the metal is kind of flopping back and forth. That's because this dent was stretched in pretty good. And unfortunately, like I said, I was not able to have the access that I wanted. Part of this was actually hammered out, and then the rest of it I had to go through there with a bar and a rod. It was a complete nightmare, and probably about 20 minutes into this job, I knew it was not going to be as easy as I had anticipated. I ended up repairing the remaining parts of this by using a 36-inch single bend with an R4 cherry tip for most of this. And what I did was I basically went from underneath the vehicle and up, and there was a small braced in area that I was able to push off of, and that's how I was able to get most of this repaired. The total repair time on this vehicle was somewhere in the 3 to 4 hour range. And like I said, I had anticipated it to move a lot easier than it did move, but I was very happy with the results, and the customer was very happy with the results. So I basically continued pushing here for an hour like this on my back, on my side. Everything about it was just terrible, but I did get the job done. At this point, I was trying to get the remaining edge that I couldn't reach from the other side of the wheel, and I was doing this with a long extension from my kit I was talking about there, the hydraulic press, and I basically was hammering it from the back side. You obviously have to be very careful when doing this because you can crack the paint really easily, and when the paint's already damaged like this was, it makes it that much easier to damage it worse than it was. So this was a lot of joy here as well. I then set the light up on the other side. Like I mentioned, there was no way to get to this part of the vehicle using the back tail light section. So I'm coming from underneath with that same 36-inch rod there and basically pushing off of, I think it was maybe the shock mount or something. I was pushing underneath something on the underside of the vehicle. At one point, I did have the porta power set up as well, and I was pushing off of the porta power arm. I may have actually been doing this at this point. But I'm basically reshaping the metal at the top part of that taillight pocket and then working my way down, and then it was just a kind of a back and forth kind of thing. There was part of it that was actually in a braced-in area as well, and for that I just used a whale tail. I think it was the one that's maybe just less, like maybe 10 inches long, with a 1-inch whale tail. So now I'm going to come in here with the blending hammer and basically bring down a lot of those spots that are sticking out from my coarse action that I took using the hammer, using the bar, and using the porta power. And you're just kind of blend this area out. And if you don't know much about blending, there's some videos you can watch on it. It's kind of one of those things you just learn once you get the basics of it down. But you can make the metal move. You can actually fix most of a dent without putting any tool behind it in a curved panel on certain, like a small hail dent. A lot of times you can actually make it disappear without putting a push behind it, or you can at least get it almost perfect doing that method. I'm not the master at blending, but I've certainly worked on a lot of hail cars and worked on a lot of big collision damage like this. You get a pretty good feeling for it. Now I'm coming in here with the tool again to get some of this. You can see the narrow, almost like a crease that's still here, and this is a very challenging spot as well. And this took quite a long time to do this area. Alright, and after working that last area for basically an hour and a half, this is what I ended up with. Pretty good, obviously not perfect. Definitely beats repainting it after replacing the panel. Certainly beats finding another bed in the same color. The customer was thrilled, the vehicle was saved, and down the bottom where the paint is cracked, he was going to tape it off and just rattle can it with some paint and some clear just to protect it. And then once the flare went back on there, it looked really good. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video today. I have a bunch of these in backlog that I'll be working on, but I've been really busy. Once the state opened back up, I've just been swamped with all the backlog of vehicles to work on. So hope you're staying well, and God bless.